Gracious Father, thank you that you are perfectly faithful. You never forget, never fail, and never take back a promise. You have said that we do not need to fear, for you are with us. We do not need to be dismayed, for you will strengthen and help us to make the right decisions for the people who serve. When we are daunted by the pressure of this board, increase our faith that we may depend on your strength for the success of the Green County Library system. Father, the Son, guide our footsteps, and the Holy Spirit watch over us on every path that we may follow during the work of this board. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Okay, we had approval of the minutes for the last meeting. I have a chance to look over those. Do I hear a motion on that?
Make a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from last meeting. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Brian is present via telephone and 5-second delay, so we can cut out anything he said we don't like. Okay, so we have a Library Materials Committee report.
Just the report, not any action, huh?
No, no, go ahead and do whatever you got. You're up next.
Am I taking action?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so the first item from the Materials Committee meeting concerns an appeal that we received from a person. The process, you all here have the same packet, we got it at the same time last month. The person has submitted a reconsideration of materials requesting the book George be reviewed by the library, and the patron asked, these were the George is later republished as Melissa. The publisher gives it a target audience, grades 3 through 7, ages 8 through 12. The main character, George, is a 10-year-old boy. We have it in our juvenile collection. The book description is George is a 10-year-old boy who wants to be a girl. When people look at George, they think they see a boy, but she knows she's not a boy, she knows she's a girl. The person they objected to the book based on the author describing gender dysphoria or rejecting one's God-given sex as normal and good. Gives the example from the book, George is in the bathtub. She tried not to think about what was between her legs, but there it was bobbing in front of her. George knows, and also introduction about transitioning. George knows how it could be done. A boy could become a girl. This is transitioning when you take hormones and have surgery. The person also objected that the material normalizes behavior which rejects God-given sex, and this is harmful, causing many adverse consequences. Sex is a biological reality, and the suppression of this truth leads to significant, according to this patron, significant confusion, instability, and destructive behavior. The patron requested that the book be removed from the library collection. The book went through review, the review process that we had with the library staff, and they sent the recommendation to the director, who then wrote back to the person and said that the library the response was only individuals can determine what is most appropriate for their needs. That's from our policy. And since the book had continued to be borrowed since being added to the collection in 2016, they have decided the library's decision was to keep the book in the juvenile collection. The person, as we allow, disagreed with that judgment and has appealed to the Material Committee. After discussing the book and reading, the Material Committee brings to the board here the recommendation that George be moved to the parent
Okay, so we have a recommendation from the Materials Committee coming to the board as a whole. Doesn't need a second since it's coming from the committee. And that recommendation was, you have that written out?
I'll take this, that last paragraph. We just recommend that it be moved to the parent early childhood section of the library.
Okay, Mr. Chairman.
I have a couple of comments I'd like to
Go ahead.
Having attended the Materials Committee meeting with keen interest and wanting to hear and assuming we would hear from the complainant, I feel that this course of action does not address nor give the complainant his day in court. This board must formally address the complaint as it stands on its own merits. We cannot and should not simply address complaints with policy changes, even if they're good. I was disappointed with the outcome. I was also disappointed that the committee did not give the full board the option of addressing or voting on the actual appeal or complaint. Because I feel the complainant did not receive his day in court, I believe he deserves a formal approval or rejection of his complaint. I'd like to offer a replacement motion for the one from the committee. I move that the appeal be sustained and the book in question, George, later published as Melissa, be removed from the GCLS system.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor that it's not really well, it's an amendment to what the Materials Committee brought, in that it rewrites it, basically. Is there a second to James' motion?
I was in favor of removing the book and accepting the appeal the first time, so I will second that motion.
Okay, so we have from the Materials Committee, got the addition over here in Brian's, and Brian, are you on the beach, buddy?
I went.
Yeah, okay, just got a lot of, beach sounds there. So the motion coming from the committee, is to move the book in question to the
PEC, parent early childhood.
Parents and Early Childhood Education section of the library, which is an adult section. Right now, it's in the juvenile section, and the juvenile section is the section that children from any age up to age 12 can check those books out without parental permission, as it stands with our current library code.
Parents have to sign for that card regardless.
The parents sign for the card, but once they sign for the card, they don't check behind them for any books in the juvenile section. She says that's correct. So, the Materials Committee, I wasn't there for that meeting, followed it closely, but their recommendation is that we move the book from the juvenile section, where children of any age can get to it without any permission, moving it to the adult section, and specifically the PEC section of the library, because of the content. James's motion is that the complainant's request that the book would be removed from the library completely be granted in place of the Materials Committee's recommendation to the board today, and that motion has been seconded. Is that clear to everyone?
through how the book's classification aligns or does not align with current policy, or is this not a policy-based decision and we're just saying, we just don't think it should be in there? I'm just trying to follow he recommended, his appeal was, I don't think it, I think the appeal is, I don't think it follows the library policy, it should be taken out, and I'm trying to follow it. I don't think his appeal really outlined that, maybe y'all got into that in a meeting, I wasn't there, so I don't really understand the policy basis for the recommendation.
My motion is not based on policy, it's based on the actual appeal itself. We have a customer of the library who has asked us to do something. I think we need to make a formal recommendation or determination on that issue alone, not necessarily based on the policy. We need to formally reject his appeal or accept it. My motion is to accept the appeal. I agree with him that it should be removed.
So do you think that the book violates current policy?
I think our very successful and,
I get that, I'm at, what is the, I forgot, somebody can correct me, I'll stop for that probably. That's the, what is that, the circulation and development policy? Collection development policy. Do you think the book violates the current collection development policy, or are you just saying, hey, I don't think this book, like, what is the, I'm just trying to understand, is the basis, religious belief, is it because it's bad literature, is it, like,
I think it
before
was,
I vote on, I want to understand what the rationale for like what we're supposedly moving.
I think it wasn't, I think it was because the book was deemed to be harmful to children, and based on that alone, it needed to come out of, not just the children's section, but the library altogether was the complainant's position. Did I say that right, Lou?
Yes.
You understand?
Is that your position?
yeah,
That's
my
why.
position is it is harmful to children. I think it's just to use the word, I think it's trash. And, we are a taxpayer funded facility and it's not the taxpayer's duty to subsidize trash. We don't need to be putting trash out.
I'll comment, I made a much longer statement at the meeting last week, but, I think I don't really like the options you gave me, Joe, for like, is it this or this, and I really don't think it's either of those. I think the library is well within its right to make decisions on individual books without where it fits in the policy. We cannot write policy that's gonna address every single thing that might be in a book. So I think it's fair for the board to consider materials as individual pieces of material without necessarily, is this in our policy? Do we have a policy that says we can't do this? So it's not, because I think it specifically violates the policy, and I think that I am very supportive of the policy that we're about to consider, but I still think that even though that policy would address this book, the book itself still has no place in a tax-funded institution. One of the main themes is the idea of parents are not safe, and parents should not be part of the conversation about these very important life decisions. There's a lot of information on clearing internet history, finding other adults that don't know you and getting them to accept you that the way you are, not your parents' knowledge. And so I can't support a policy that says we believe that parents are the primary source of education for their children, and also support using tax dollars to pay for a book that says parents are not the primary source of education for their children. So that's why I support an opportunity to vote to remove the book.
Got it. My concern is, no, and I'm not getting into the book, that's why I was asking the question. I am a little concerned about the idea that the board is gonna become we're gonna have an endless string of book consideration requests on both sides, right? Because if I'm sitting here thinking, and I know like y'all hate that I do this, but I like to try to think about how things can be abused. And the purpose of that is to try to help us make better policy. But, you know, what I don't think we want is like people just gumming up the works, and like we could have thousands of books being submitted because somebody's just like, I'm gonna make the board's life miserable. And we do have a policy about how quickly we have to review books and all this so I do think, I agree with you, the board does have a prerogative to make recommendations on books, but I think a much healthier path from a regulatory standpoint is, to try to think about healthy policies that address the concepts or ideas that we are trying to address. You know, it's kind of called regulation by enforcement, and the problem is when you do that, nobody knows where the lines are. And while that is, and that becomes confusing to patrons, but also becomes very confusing to our staff, right? So they then sort of become a little bit like, I think the way maybe lawyers and judges have to function, where it's like sometimes there's clear statutes and then there's case law, and they gotta like look back through all the decisions and try to define the tea leaves. And I don't think any of us want to put them in that position. So that's where I mean, whether I'm for or against this specific book or the policy in general, we'll get to that. I would be opposed to this motion simply because I think we need to do it at the policy level and not at the specific regulatory enforcement level. Even if I'm like at this point not making a call on the book either way, whether I was for it or against it, I would still vote against this motion.
I'm sorry. You just talked me into a circle there.
That was the idea. No, I'm essentially saying I think we should vote no and focus on the policy, and then we can get into, rather than just saying, well, this book, I don't think anybody can point out a violation of current policy in this book, is what I'm getting at. And I think that may not be the case in 25 minutes, so that's.
I think that's what Elizabeth just did, is when she went over that, and you weren't there, to hear she had a whole, statement about why she thought the book didn't belong in the library in the first place. That was regarding just the overall, is the book harmful to children? And if it is, then it should be out of the library completely. And the people that want to see it leave the library, that's their point. And that's an overall goal of the library, is to not have materials that are harmful to children in the children's section. And if we want to have truth in advertising, that we say that what we have in the children's section is safe for children to go and browse and take out. And we tell parents that if they sign up for their children to have a children's card, then they're only going to be allowed to take books out of the children's section and check them out. They can take any book in the library while they're here, but as far as checking anything out, they can only check anything out of the juvenile section. Say that right?
Unless they've been given a juvenile card.
Unless they've been given, I'm talking about people who, the parents give their children a card that's a juvenile card, not a juvenile adult. Juvenile adult gives them keys to the kingdom, basically. Okay, so we're talking about parents give their card to their children the ability to check out books that are in the juvenile and below sections. All right, so we ought to be able to tell the parents that if we have something in the juvenile or below section, that if their children take a book from that section, it's a safe book. And not that the book, as this one does, encourages them to not tell their parents that they're thinking about changing their gender, or that they're thinking about talking to someone other than their parents about how to make that happen, and how to hide their search history on the computer. And this is a how-to guide, for
I agree with you, Alan, but you're now back to should it be in the kids section or not, which is not what the motion is talking about. So like, you're having a debate with me, which is not the debate I'm having. I haven't advocated for the book in any way.
I'm not having the debate about the children. I'm saying the motion that came from the materials committee was to move this out of the children's section because we we wanted to have truth in advertising, so to speak.
No, I get that, but we're on to a different motion.
Right? And so that,
So are you talking about the original one or the new one?
I'm talking about, I'm answering your question as to why they're saying that this book doesn't need to be in the library, period. And, their point is that if it's harmful to children, and it's written toward them, it's specifically stated that its target audience is our children, us moving it out of the children's section to some folks is not good enough. Getting it out of the library is what needs to happen. And so I'm just trying to, just hold that if you don't mind. So that is the problem. And I don't think that we can not take an action based on what we think might happen as to how many people might bring about appeals, books, or whatever, based on, all of that. That's just what we signed up for as board members, is if people appeal the staff's recommendation enough that comes before us, then that's just what we will do.
Mr. Chairman, I do think most of us know where we stand on this issue, and I was hoping I could call the question.
Okay.
James, motion.
What I'm worried about here, we get on the slippery slope, I'm thinking, I think if I wanted my kid to have that book, I should have the right for my kid to see that book. You put it in the DEC section, which means that smaller, younger children can't get to it anyway. Right, is that correct?
They can't check it out.
Can't check it out. They
They
won't see it at
can
all.
get it, but they can't check it out.
They can walk over to that section, take out the shelf they wanted to.
Yes, sir.
and look at it.
Yes, sir.
Look, he didn't hire that.
It's higher, okay.
It is
But
not.
now, it's still up to the parent to be money for the child within the library.
Say that
It's
again?
still up to the parent to money for the child, not let this go.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
My thinking is, I don't know when it's gonna stop them. If we do this now, this book, I don't know when it's gonna stop. Everybody's gonna have something to say about Black history. I don't know what happened. That could be next. Some people don't wanna know what happened.
Right.
So they might wanna do that. I think we should.
People can say what they want to, it's up to the board to determine whether the action happens or not. And so what we have before us right now is we have a motion to amend the materials committee recommendation which is to remove the book. So I would like to go ahead and vote on that unless somebody has something else that really needs to be said about that.
I'm going back to Joe's point. I would, when I look at the policy, I'm with you. In order to vote on this, I want to know what this book, what it violates as far as policies in place. We may have these, because it feels like we're going to make a call on this and then we're going to turn around and we're going to do a policy change that could impact what we just voted on. It's almost like we have it in reverse order.
Yeah, I asked the chairman of this board and the chairman of the committee to reverse the order prior to this meeting for this very reason.
Yeah.
They chose not to, but it's very confusing.
And the reason I'll tell you the reason I didn't, is because it came to us in the order that we have, which is someone brought up the fact that this book doesn't need to be in the library in their opinion, okay? They went through the motions, they went through the appeals process, and it's before us today. As a result of them bringing this book to our attention, we decided that there was nothing in place in our policies regarding transgender issues. Now, it doesn't change the fact that this book violates the policy that's in place, that's overall policy that we have in the library, that says we don't need to have books in the children's section that are specifically written for children as a target audience that are harmful to children. Okay? That doesn't have anything to do with whether it's transgender or not. This book has things in it that one could take a look at and find that it's harmful to children. And we realize that there's nothing in our policies because, you know, before 10 years ago, I can't even remember when the first time I heard about kids talking about being a different gender, but it hasn't been more than 10 years ago. But we never had to have a policy specifically regarding transgender type books in the children's section. And so we became aware of that because of this appeal. So the decision about what to do with the book can be made without regard to the specific policy that would keep this book out, because there's an overriding policy that the library has that would keep books like this out of the library, or out of the children's section at least, based on, is it harmful to children?
And that's under the collection, development, and maintenance policy, or that's something you want to talk about in general?
I can't put chapter and verse on that. But
Yeah, I think we're still conflating two things, which is, should it be in the children's section, which is a question. There's a separate question of should it be in the library, and we're like, Alan, we keep trying to jam the two together, right? Like, instead of saying, okay, hey, there are a lot of books.
I'm sorry, dude, but you asked me what the purpose of the appeal was, or how the appeal was, and I just tried to explain why the appeal didn't need the policy, and they think it shouldn't be in the library. The materials committee thinks it should be in the children's section. I'm not conflating those two. I'm just trying to explain why we don't have to have a policy specifically for this book. We shouldn't be held up to just work on specific policies. We could never, to take your example, we could never come up with policies that would take away that overriding policy, which is it harmful or not? Does it need to be in the collection? That's up to us.
Right, but I think we can go to it in a minute. My point is, I agree with you, we don't have to have a policy. Like, legally, we do not have to have a policy, right? Which is the argument you're making. And I'm saying, that may be true, but
Specific
we
policy.
know this is a very, very significant issue. It's a better approach in my book to create good guidelines and policy rather than act, create policy by enforcement, which is what we're doing. We're saying, no, we don't like this book, we're going to remove it. And the challenge becomes, if you then go to the adult section, there's probably many, many, many books in the adult section that could be construed as harmful to children. And
Not that are written for children.
and, I think the problem is, though, you're saying there's this overriding policy that any book is harmful to children should not be in the collection. And I'm not saying that we should have books that are harmful to children in the collection. I just think we need to get the cart before the horse. So let's vote no on this, and let's deal with the policy, and then we'll let the chips fall where they fall on the policy. Is kind of my argument. And we might all come out the same place on policy anyway. That's kind of where I'm at. It's not on the merits of the book.
As the maker of the motion, or comment? All vote?
Sure.
I think we must be able to separate the instance from the overall. You can have policies all day long, but you're always going to have an instance that is different and is a special case. You can't have a policy that regulates every title in every book and on a shelf. It's not possible. So in my mind, I have separated the instance, or the specific, from the overall. I don't believe that as a taxpayer-funded entity, this book is available online, all over. If you want it, go get it. Buy it for your kids, whatever you want. This library does not have to subsidize somebody's desire or add material that's harmful to children. We don't have to provide it for people. It's not in our purview to say, we must allow you, we must give you this material. So on those bases, on the instance, on the specific, I'm saying, we don't need it, we don't need it in our collection, it's against common decency in my mind, again, it's harmful to children, and we can go on and on. I don't think this is something that we can be proud
think we don't have to have a next vote. We have 3-4, and, I guess we can say, everybody against the amendment, let's go ahead and do that, so everybody on the record.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Brian? Okay.
Okay? So the motion fails, but we're back to the committee's recommendation that the book George, or now known as Melissa, even the book is trans, can move to the PEC section of the adult, part of the library. Everybody clear with that?
Line of all my previous comments, I'm going to no on this motion because I don't believe this addresses the issue. I think it's a failed attempt at doing what's right, so I will no on this motion.
Okay. We've got, I think we've had plenty of discussion regarding this issue on the amendment, which is applicable both ways. So everybody in favor of the committee's recommendation to move the book to the PEC section of the library, raise your hand.
6, 7, 8, 9.
Okay? And we have, did you say Brian, you're in too?
Yeah.
Okay?
Was it favor?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So you're opposed, but it's not that you're opposed to moving it, you're just opposed to moving it.
Opposed to the process of what we just did, so for that reason, I voted no on the motion.
Okay. All right, so we have that taken care of. As I said, the fact that there wasn't a specific policy in place, as I tell my now adult kids, they say, why do you have to have a policy? I said, well, honey, a few years ago we had people with good sense. We didn't have to have a policy that said that you didn't need to have transgender books in the books about how to make yourself transgender in the children's section. But now we do. So if this fact that this book was there and that there wasn't anything specific on it brought that to light. And so we have a committee recommendation regarding that situation.
Okay, it is a hard subject because a lot of us personally feel strongly one way. However, the material committee has responded to the fact that we do not have a policy and has come up with one. And I would like to preface it by saying some of the considerations, recognizing parental oversight. We already allow, parents already choose the kind of card they want their child to have. And if people would argue, I was trying to think of all the arguments against this, that people would argue that it makes it harder to find. Actually, I would think that putting them all in one place makes it easier for people to find. And although we're not under the Library of Congress cataloging system, just for information's sake, their big umbrella category is family, sexuality, and under that some subheadings of gender. So the closest we have at this moment in our library is the parenting early childhood section. The policy, I believe, is very moderate, but it's inclusive. That means, in this case, that, for example, it's not one-sided. We have a couple of books, at least one that we found, and I'm sure more. But if it's specifically about this topic of gender identity, and say it presents a different view, perhaps a biblical worldview, specifically about gender, it too would be moved. So it's not just a one-sided policy here. And a couple of us on the committee actually tested these bullet points against about 20 books that we found that were keyworded very easily, to see how difficult or easy it would be for staff to go through. This last process that we have in place for reviewing books is very time-consuming. We wanted to be specific, and so that being said, this is what we have come up with. The library recognizes parents are the primary source of education for their children, and they have a fundamental right and responsibility to direct the upbringing and education of children under their care, including issues of moral, social, physical, civic, and spiritual development. To that end, materials targeting audiences 0 through 12, in which the illustrations, themes, or storylines affirm, portray, or discuss changing the appearance of a minor's gender in ways inconsistent with the minor's biological sex will be located in the Parenting in Early Childhood collection, including social transitioning, pronouns or dress inconsistent with biological sex, medical or surgical procedures, puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, or surgical procedures for the purpose of altering biological sex, and discussions of gender fluidity, the possibility of changing genders at will or being no gender at all. So the recommendation to the board, that's the recommendation.
Okay. Is there any discussion regarding the materials committee recommendation?
One change, we added legal guardians beside parents.
Sorry.
So just add that to the policy.
I still have some question about the term dress marshal. To me, that's a vague term. It may cause misinterpretation across staff, across our system. And I suggest that perhaps administration staff look at that and maybe define that a little bit better. I think that would be better for staff to do that than our board to do that. Dress is just a big term. You know, it's difficult sometimes to what somebody may term inappropriate dress and one says that another branch may look at that, so that's not good. That's not fun. So, if that's even possible to do.
What is, I think this is Tommy's question. What is, and again, I'm not necessarily antagonistic to the ideas or the concept. Now we're getting the material. But I think we do have some vagueness here. What is dress inconsistent with biological sex? We added like a definition of that. Like that is that a male? Is that males wearing dresses? And when does that apply? I think is if we have a book where somebody like kids bathe the closet and do dress up, right? I don't think that is what anybody's after. What I'm getting at is how can we strengthen the policy to make it, to bring clarity to it, rather than, because the problem is lack of clarity creates all kinds of problems, and then it doesn't get applied the way anybody actually intends it to get applied. So I am really attempting to try to brainstorm with the group here on, can we narrow that, or maybe we can't, and then we just say, hey, we have to give a few examples as a part of the policy.
Well, since this policy is specific to gender identity issues and not tomboy or imagination or play dressing, the policy is about changing that you are dressing for the purpose of identifying as a girl. When I finish playing Cowboys and Indians, I put my costumes in the toy box and go to school. And I think even doing keywords, searches on these books, dress comes up. Some of these books pop up very quickly because it is specific gender identity. We are not talking about books that talk about kids just having imagination at the end of the day, it's over. I think because the policy is gender identity, dress is related to that.
So I agree with you that I think that's what everybody intends, but I think this policy says that if a book, it's an or there, affirms, portrays, or discusses, and then we go through the rest of them. And then it's including semicolons, right? If we do portrayal, if it portrays these bullet points, like if we do a circle around portrayal and then it goes to all the bullet points and say, I agree with you that that's what we're not trying to get, but I think we could get that. And that's what I'm getting at is can we tighten up the language a little bit so we don't have that problem? Because I think if I wanted to be Mr. Smarty Pants, I would say, well, if the book portrays dress inconsistent with biological sex, that is very broad, right? Because sometimes that is directed at gender fluidity and gender identity, which is what the policy is targeted at. And sometimes that has nothing to do with gender identity, because it's like, hey, we rated like kids' book, where it's like they raided the closet at Halloween, and everybody's putting on mom and dad's clothes, right? And they're not always going on the same gender kid. And I realize nobody is advocating that book would somehow be taught in this policy, but I think we've got a gap there, because I do think it is. Because the book we don't narrow the policy to only books that are advocating for, I think the term gender fluidity or a change in gender identity.
I think that's exactly what it does.
Can we do that though? Can we put a phrase right in it, like social transition, like when we're talking about dress, can we say, bullet point, social transitioning, pronouns or dress inconsistent with biological sex, comma, or
Yeah,
specifically
with the
affirming gender transition, so that we're all very clear, this is not a picture of a plain dress up, but just a clarification phrase in parentheses, comma, following that, so that no one can, be sassy and throw in a dress up book, but it just says, we're specifically regarding affirming gender transition.
The other way we do it is, I think we take the word portray out, we kind of get to the same place, but if you take portray out of sentence 2, I don't think that substantively changes the policy in any way, but it gets at that same idea. And it kind of gets past the accidental, unintentional portrayal that could be twisted in some way, where that's clearly not the intent. Either one is.
I think if a few books get caught up and have to be looked at and say, the judge, oh no, this has no themes of gender identity at all, it's not a big deal. There are several that specifically say, if you just keyword gender identity, certain books regarding dress pop up because they are definitely, the dress is the relationship to gender identity. I don't think I like Kristen's just clarification, if we need clarification.
And I'm not opposed to Kristen's suggestion, but I also think it's important that we not discount the professionalism of the people who will be applying this policy. I don't think we have to write it in such a way that it is going to be used by people who can't think things through. I looked at like Marsha, I looked at over 20 books in the juvenile section that come up when you do searches on gender identity, gender fluidity, and this is a consistent thing throughout that story. It's very clear the difference between the books that are about dress up and the books that are about can you change your gender to be different from your biological sex from either perspective. And the stories about dress being consistent with biological sex look very different, which is why they're tagged with something that says gender fluidity or gender identity. And I think that the librarians who would be in charge of categorizing these books would be capable of working from this policy. I think they would understand the difference. But if you think they wouldn't, I would open to that phrase.
Yeah, I don't personally think it's about professionalism or our librarians or capability. They're very capable. I'm thinking about people that want to be problematic for the sake of being problematic. That's where these policies get blown up, right? Is there's a gap or a loophole that's unintentional and it's unclear, and somebody that is shrewd and savvy and, you know, wants to create issues will use that wedge to drive a giant, they end up destroying the whole policy because of this unintentional gap, right? We've all seen it done, right? It happens in our courts of law all the time, right? Where legislators make a policy and then the wording's unclear and it's like, what is the meaning of is. And it's not that people can't think about it. It's not even that it's unclear. Like, I think all of us could agree, it's pretty clear. A book that's like, you know, people are, I don't know, dressing up as, doing play dress up as part of a Halloween book is clearly different in intent than what is contemplated by this policy. But the problem is that's not what the policy says. It says if it portrays you putting on clothes that do not identify with your biological sex, you now have a book that has to be relocated. So I would move that we add the,
That's not what it says.
it is, it says if it portrays
No, it says,
any of these things.
it says, to that end, materials targeting audiences age 0 to 12, in which the illustrations, it's an overall, transitioning, to change one's sex, one's gender, from the biological sex at birth. And dress is just one of the factors that are in that, pronouns, changing the pronouns, changing the dress of the person, taking puberty, all of that together it's not scouting To Kill a Mockingbird, dressing up like a boy. There was no gender transitioning encouraged there or anything. So this is all.
I'm struggling with why you guys are so opposed to clarifying this in a way that is substantively not. It feels like there's just so much resistance to changing anything here, versus what's being offered is
I'm not opposed to clarifying. I'm just you're saying that somebody's going to drive a wedge that you can drive a truck through later on. I think it's just it's a little bit.
I mean, I've heard a number of people that have read this policy that have expressed that concern to me, so I don't think I'm alone in coming to this conclusion that it's unclear. I mean, you heard Tommy say it, you've heard other people say it.
What is the suggestion?
The suggestion is to add permanent instruction.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So I'm in support of this policy, but I can see where you're coming from. That was my only teeny tiny little hesitation, is that I wanted to make sure that this was clear when we said dress and consistent. And I can see the point of, hey, in regards to all what we've said, but for the sake of making sure we're double clear, it feels like it's being redundant, but we could say, like I said, social transition, pronouns or dress inconsistent with biological sex, parentheses, specifically affirming gender transition or identity. Just so that there's no question.
Okay, yeah, I'm fine with that, because I didn't want to go on and on about it without somebody saying what needs to be in there.
Just adding that.
Is that your motion to amend it? What were you saying?
I'm gonna take a little different approach, and I'm gonna be against even adding little words in there, because I'm getting tired of trying to legislate perfection, getting tired of trying to make things so tight that we don't end up doing anything. We gotta make judgment calls. There's always a lawyer out there somewhere in this world who's gonna fine-tooth comb pin everything. You cannot ever legislate out stuff that somebody's not gonna find. You cannot control the busybodies.
Not that Joe needs it, but their point is that it could be tightened up. Do it.
Well, if you tighten it up, you're not gonna stop and you're not gonna control the busybodies, because
Well, I say the same
I'm
thing.
the guy who would probably go out and be the busybody and try to find every loophole for this.
I would say the same thing to you. I'm saying to Joe, which is you can't go down that rabbit hole forever about you're saying you can't get it so tight, and he's saying you can't leave it so loose. So let's get a Goldilocks approach here and do this.
There's still going to be discretion regardless with the state.
Sure.
With library.
That's true.
Human nature, and you have to accept that. but as it's written, I think it's all right. But discretion is gonna come into, it's a fact.
Okay,
So we also have in the last two bullet points, you use the words for the purpose of, and then gender fluidity, the possibility of. So you are, to be consistent, former English teacher to me, the consistency of all three of the bullets having for the purpose of, or having the reason for, makes sense to me from a consistency standpoint. And I agree with what James is saying. Of course, somebody can pick apart anything, but the consistency in all three of those bullets of having the purpose of, or possibility of, or the reason for, makes it all consistent. All three of them are consistent.
So you're saying in each of those, like, social transitioning for the person?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do that.
And that way, all three of those statements have the reasoning of why we're putting it in there, so that people aren't going to be like, oh, well, again, Scout dressed as a convoy. Well, that's not what we're talking about.
exactly, exactly. This is the perfect being the enemy of the good. But I like your suggestion there. So can we get that in the form of a motion?
Yes. Okay, I move that we add the clause for the purpose of affirming gender transition to the end of, I'm gonna read it. Social transitioning, pronouns or dress inconsistent with biological sex for the purpose of affirming gender transition. Medical or surgical procedures, puberty blocking drugs, cross-sex hormones, or surgical procedures for the purpose of altering for the purpose of affirming gender transition. Gender fluidity, the possibility of changing genders at will or being a gender at all. Yeah. For the purpose of gender transition. Or affirming gender transition. So the phrase is for the purpose of affirming gender transition.
Are you clear on that, Jill?
You want to add that phrase to the end of each
Each
bullet?
bullet point.
Or you're adding it to each. It's not just the first social transition you're
Yeah,
adding.
we're adding it to each, just like we taken, so that there's consistency, so that each of those are essentially done in clear.
Okay.
Is that replacing, it's just, we're gonna have to like, at some point, we're gonna have minutes on this, so we have to read this and all what it said. So just to be, the second bullet, are we leaving the current wording for the purpose of all, I mean,
No, I'm glad you brought that up. Let's talk about that.
are we replacing that?
Let's
to make them
replace
all
that.
identical?
No, I'm glad.
That's my,
Okay, no, I'm glad. So, bullet point number 2, medical or surgical procedures, puberty blocking drugs, cross-sex hormones, or surgical procedures for the purpose of affirming gender transition. Does that make sense? To have that parallel in all three.
yeah, I think it's a lot more clear what the policy is of this one.
All three.
Yeah.
All three will say the exact same thing at the end.
Okay.
So we delete the second bullet for the purpose of altering biological sex, and replace it with for the purpose of affirming gender transitioning.
I think it should be transitioning. Jill, can you put that? Transitioning.
Okay, I'm gonna take that as a motion. Does everybody understand what it is?
The whole policy itself, or just the?
Just, that's an motion to alter
here, they don't wanna make those decisions, that's why we're here, so I think there's a substantial impact for their sake, on this issue.
Second.
All right, so we got a motion and a second. What did we get?
I'm happy to be alone, no vote again, I think it's just unnecessary, and it's just, why are we going down this perfection route, it's just garbage. I'm gonna vote no on this amendment, I'll be happy to be the one to.
Let me try to talk you out of that for the purpose of unanimity here. But what difference, if they had come in here with that on the end of all three of these, that says for the purpose of, what's the phrasing there?
Affirming gender transition.
Yeah, if that were on all three of these when it came in, you'd have been happy about it.
Yeah, I had to read it, study it, and it would have been probably something good. Obviously, we're going down the rabbit hole, of trying to be too perfect. It's unnecessary.
All right, you can't make everything good. Okay, so let's vote on this thing. We got a first, a motion and a second, and, all in favor of the motion, say aye. All right, all opposed? Okay. All right, so now we have the motion coming from the Materials Committee as amended by us just now. And what that is going to do is move any books that fall into this category, to the PEC section of the, adult section of the library. Everybody understand that? All right.
This will be added, right, as part of the collection development policy.
You all agree that,
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Certainly.
there's six. Not every location has one.
The question was, does, how many of the branches have a PEC section? Some of the smaller branches do not have a PEC section. There are 6, what Beth thinks, that's not her.
How would it take long to have a piece? Because this policy might collect more books, and therefore every branch may need to have a place for them to go. Is it possible for every branch to go?
Well, there's 6 issues that have to be considered. It may be that we would transfer a book that does, from a location that doesn't have a PEC collection at the moment, that we would transfer that book to another location that does, if it happens to be at that branch. That's one option for us to take.
And book, and if I wanted that book and it didn't have that section, I could order the book and pick it up in my library.
You say that again?
Because if I wanted that book and you didn't have it, I could order it for my library.
Yes, yeah, just like every other book right now, yeah.
Okay. Anything else? All right, all in favor of the change to the policy as amended, say aye. All opposed? Thank you. Yeah. Let me just say, with regard to what you were saying about the staff, I don't see this change in the policy as calling out the staff to scour through all the books. I think the general public is gonna do that job for us. As they find books that violate this policy, I think that will,
I'm just saying if there's appeals and stuff like that. I agree with you. I'm not saying like this is, they gotta find them, but I think when stuff comes through, I'm just saying they generally, at least if they express to me, like clearer guidelines, because they feel like then they're applying policy versus they get really, really uncomfortable when they feel like they're having to like make policy judgment calls. Because it's the right desire, like they want to do the right thing, but if you're not sure what the right thing is, then that makes them nervous. I wasn't saying that they're gonna do fine on them.
yeah, and then
That's probably been done already, so.
yeah, somebody brought that up earlier, that there's gonna be a lot of work for the staff. I don't really see this, I think I speak for the board and say that we don't expect the staff to go scouring through all the books now and, to try to fulfill this policy. As we buy new materials, or as the question comes up, I think it's gonna be taken care of.
No, I kind of disagree.
Ma'am?
Yeah. A simple keyword search on just gender identity and transgenderism with an audience of juvenile pops up under 20 books, but very quickly identifies them. So what I'm saying, even with this policy in place, it would not be that, I mean, I'm not asking the staff to go through everything, but
And you're saying it would be easy to get
To get
the
some-
low-hanging fruit, so to speak.
yeah, exactly.
Is the ones that show up in a quick search.
Yeah,
But as far as going through all the books and reading them,
yeah.
yeah,
But I wouldn't
that's not
want,
necessary as your
but
point.
I wouldn't want to say they don't have to do anything about it because that leaves the door open for a gazillion appeals, you know, book by book as we can find them or something. So I'm just saying there are, we've identified at least 18 under just simple keyword search that doesn't require very much, and they're specifically described as gender identity or transgender. So right there, you know, that's the main topic.
I would encourage the public to file again. Absolutely. Your library.
Yeah, well, I think the gentleman that filed the appeal is here today for the books in question. Yeah, thank you for your diligence. Next thing on the agenda is, Director.
I just wanted to report that over 200 persons attended the Greenville concert and performance at the main library on February 17th. It's very popular program, and I wanted to note the successful Friends of the Greenville County Library System used book sales in recent January and February sales and memberships sold totaled over $17,000. We appreciate the public support of those sales. The digital displays and branches in the story block have been underwritten by the Friends of the Library because of the generous support of the public.
That's it. Okay, any unfinished business or new business?
I just wanted to make a comment. I don't know who's doing the Instagram account for the library, but it has just been fantastic. I have really enjoyed the different reels and posts that have been going on Instagram, so I hope you're seeing a uptick in your engagement too. It's just been incredible.
And to get that person in that position now.
Okay, we have time for some public comment, and the first one on the list is Susan Sarabia. Good afternoon. Let me remind everybody, I know you know, but this is a reminder for me actually to get out my stopwatch and start it, because one time I didn't do that and really bad. All right. You have 3 minutes, thank you.
Hi. Well, you know, everybody's supposed to know what decency is, you know? As a taxpayer, I am asking to remove book, George, or any book that promotes offenses against morality and decency in minors. What I want to say is that I heard a lot of this nonsense coming to here. Oh, the parents are librarian knows best, but that's not entirely true. We have cases here in South Carolina where a parent murdered his entire family. And we have countless news from media where pedophiles are being arrested. One issue was in 2019 when a Greenville County undercover operation targeting child sex crimes and human trafficking netted 45 arrests. So let me tell you, when we grow kids, it's not for the best of them and them. They are doing that for sex trafficking and to destroy a child's life. Once you destroy a child's life, you cannot reverse it. Okay, it's permanent. A a grown-up made a decision for that child. That child didn't grow up to decide for himself if he wanted to be a transgender or whatever, because he was not at the age of making responsible decisions. And it is very sad that the United States have come so low that for God, what is good, they call it good what is bad and bad what is good. Shame. Shame on you people. You have to understand that the kids have to be protected. If you're an adult, do whatever you want, because you already have the capacity to think and decide for yourself, but not children. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person is Autumn Michael.
Hello, I'm Autumn. I live in Taylor's. First, I want to remind the board that this is a public library. The first sentence in the library's code of conduct that I've handed out to each one of you says, the Greenville County Libraries strives to provide and maintain inviting facilities and grounds where everyone feels welcome and valued. This board is not upholding that statement. It is not upholding that statement. I'm sure you remember the signs that people have had at past meetings that read Greenville is a conservative community. That is false. While conservatives are certainly part of our community. 40% of voters in Greenville County voted for Biden, and 40% of the county's population claims no religion. 30% of LGBTQ people in South Carolina are raising children. In essence, your board is potentially not serving up to 4 out of 10 library patrons. I am not looking to exclude anyone, but some of you want to exclude my parental rights. My parental rights and my child's rights. My child's rights to go.
If you want to address us, you may, but you're not to turn around.
My rights as a parent to allow my child to go whimsically to the children's section and pick a book that she is interested in. And it is my responsibility, per your code of conduct number 8, that it's my responsibility to stay with my child and watch my child and see what they do. Otherwise, anyone not doing that is lazy parenting, and they want to put this back on the library board and take away my rights as a parent, Mr. Ward, and my right as a parent, Elizabeth, and my right as a parent, Marsha, and my right as a parent, Cecil. Y'all need to understand, this is a public library. You are not a school board. You are not dealing with something that is a smaller group of people. This is a public library, and you are here to serve 100% of Greenville County residents, not just the ones you want to serve and enact your own policies. I was very taken aback at the materials review committee meeting last week. It felt like I was at a Senate Medical Affairs Committee meeting that I was at earlier this month in Columbia. Elizabeth, you said, I believe children to express that themselves, which I mean, I guess you're thinking about transgender children or queer children. So I believe that children to express that themselves that way are worthy of respect and all the same opportunities as any other child. By removing books from the children's section, you are taking away the fun and whimsical opportunity for some children in our county to find a book they would enjoy, relate to, or develop care for another child who is a bit different from them. You are taking away the ability of every children. Is that my end of 3 minutes? Okay, I emailed all of you my statement.
Thank you. We have Leslie Johnson.
My name is Leslie Johnson, and I have 3 LGBTQ plus family members, and I'm a co-founder with Carol Linder of Greenville's PFLAG 31 years ago. I was unable to attend the committee meeting, but I watched and listened to it on YouTube. My remarks are in regard to what I heard and read on closed caption. Oh dear. As a child, I always knew I was a girl. I did not have to be told or reminded about my gender. If you are honest, you had the same experience, unless you were like our transgender children who struggle to find the support they need in order to be who they are. Why should they have to struggle? Except for unenlightened and uncaring people who are in a position of power to use their own prejudices to make transgender people's lives miserable. It seems that most of this board go to the same well of disinformation about transgender. Facts seem to have no place. References to surgeries were made during the meeting, which doctors and counselors verify do not occur in South Carolina. And there are other medical reasons for puberty blockers which have been used for years. A statement was made about children becoming confused reading a child's book about transgender. The confusion is likely to be for the children who are unsure about their own gender. People who are not medically certified should refrain from making diagnoses. Once again, I remind you that parents of transgender children are also taxpayers. The pronoun it, I too, has no place in civil discourse about transgender people. A statement was made about the book Melissa encouraging trans children not to trust their parents, which may be for good reason. The transgender children who need the county libraries are sadly not safe with most of you. Thank you.
We have Claire Walsh.
Hi, my name is Claire Walsh, and I am a taxpayer for Greenville County. I live in Travelers Rest. We moved down here 35 years ago to bring our children up in the Bible Belt. I too have a gay sister who's been married 25 years, and I have a transgender nephew who is extremely confused at this time, and everyone in our family is very concerned for him. I have been researching a lot of the books in our library, and I'm concerned that as a taxpayer, I'm having to pay for a lot of these books. This book right here absolutely horrified me when I read it. There is over and over and over again in this book sexual violence, drinking, drugs, and it all takes place within a teenage environment. This book is in the young adult section in our library. I am appalled. If there was a movie written, I'm sorry?
What's the name of that book?
The Female of the Species. And what's real sad is it's a librarian who wrote this book. If this book was made into a movie, it would be rated XX. So why is a child able to read this book? I would like to know, I have a lot of questions concerning my library. Who recommends some of these books? Who oversees the purchase of these books? Who approves these books? I too am a taxpayer and want my children to feel safe in the library. And I don't feel safe if one of my teenage grandkids comes across this book and thinks it's okay to read it. And I'm fed up with people making it like they're in the majority around here, and they're not. And I'm gonna put up a fight. I have access to a website that reviews all the books that I'm concerned about. the stuff that's in these books. Thus, I went ahead and filled out forms to have these books removed for now from the children's section. My hope is that some of these books will be removed from our library. This is a public library, and all of our public should feel safe to come into the library. And I commend this gentleman here on fighting, along with the rest of us, and Elizabeth and the rest of you, to get this smut out of our libraries. That's not where it belongs. You want your kid to read it, fine. Go get it somewhere else.
Melissa Nichols?
Good afternoon, I'm a resident and taxpayer in Greenville. I'm a longtime library patron. I'm a parent of 2 kids in the Greenville County school system, and I'm a lawyer. And I'm concerned about the steps this board is taking in all of these capacities. I'm concerned about the way the board has handled the appeal challenge to the book Melissa, as well as the proposed amendment to the collection development maintenance policy, or now the amendment. Because I have only a short time to talk, I'm going to focus on the proposed policy amendment. The amendment that is being considered to the material collection and maintenance policy is blatantly illegal and will expose the county to expensive litigation. The board has considered and wisely rejected a similar proposed amendment less than a year ago. I urge you to reconsider what you're doing and reject the language that was proposed today. It would clearly be viewpoint discrimination, would be unconstitutional, and would likely lead to a costly lawsuit that would waste taxpayer money. When the similar amendment was proposed last year, there was a public outcry, and this board heard from national organizations, including the National Coalition Against Censorship. I know that in its letter to the board, that organization cited the Sun v. City of Wichita Falls case, and I'm hoping that this board has read that case. In Sun, a city relocated from the children's area, books that addressed sexual orientation and featured characters in same-sex relationships. The defendants in Sun argued that moving the books from the children's section to the adult section did not violate the First Amendment because they did not ban the books entirely. The federal court rejected this argument, finding that an outright ban is not the only way to violate the First Amendment. Disadvantaging access or imposing disparate burdens on accessing public library materials violates this First Amendment when the substantial reason for doing so is an objection to the content contained in the materials or the viewpoints expressed in them. Specifically, the board found that patrons browsing the children's section would be unable to find the books, and the same concern exists here. A public library can't access or limit access to its materials solely because of the content of those materials unless it can demonstrate that the limit is necessary to achieve a compelling government interest, and that there are no less restrictive alternatives available. The proposed language, or the language that you consider today, specifically targets books with a particular viewpoint on gender, and that's clear from the language that you all put on the public record today. At the Materials Committee meeting, similar comments were made. Board members offered their own views on gender identity as the basis of their decision. One board member even opined about how many Greenville County residents she thought would agree with her. The public comments that the members of this board have already made will be used as evidence in any litigation that this restriction is an unconstitutional viewpoint restriction. Recordings of the Materials Committee meeting and recordings of this meeting are replete with those comments. I anticipate that when the minutes of the committee meeting and this meeting are released, if they are thorough and accurate, they too will provide evidence to a court that this proposed amendment is viewpoint-based discrimination. I urge you to consult legal counsel if you haven't already done so.
Thank you. Allison Powell. Allison Powell, I believe. Thank you. Alan Fisher.
Good afternoon, my name is Adam Fisher. I am a Greenville County resident, taxpayer, library patron. Grateful for the public service that you engage in, grateful for the people who are behind me, grateful for the community that we have. I'm also disappointed, disturbed, emotional, all the things that I think go into a meeting like this. In my professional life, I am a pastor, and we serve to work in a church where we help people embody love. And I hear these meetings start with prayers invoking the name of Jesus, invoking God, whose guidance often leans towards grace and forgiveness, and yet I hear lots of sanctimonious language, pointing of fingers, and instead of space at the table, exclusion. And it hurts me in many ways to think that a community might speak on behalf of God or on behalf of others in ways that would exclude or limit. A wise librarian once told me that books are like windows and doors and mirrors. Sometimes you can look out a window and you can see another world that you can't reach or get to yourself. Sometimes a book opens a door that you can walk into a world and walk alongside someone else and hear about their experience, not that you would become them, but you might understand what it's like to be in someone else's shoes. And sometimes a book is a mirror where you get to see yourself reflected and representation matters. I'm really scared that our community might make decisions that close doors, shatter mirrors, and paint our windows in ways that simply show reflections of our own selves. As if common sense might mean that everyone must believe like I believe. I grew up in a little town called Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and we fought hard against white supremacy and Aryan Nation groups that were in that community. We also fought to make sure that their voice was heard because the First Amendment mattered and freedom was a real thing. And so we had planned parades in my town because we protected the First Amendment, not because we agreed with different viewpoints. We were also taught as children that hate has a really vicious look. So I would encourage you always to side with love and not hate, for love is patient and kind and gentle and it does not boast. It can bear all things, it can hold all things, it can make all things present. And when you do anything else, you are limiting the expressions of who we ought to be as our better selves.
Beth Wadsworth.
Thank you for all that you do, and thank you for protecting our children. Today I'm actually addressing 2 books from the young adult section, and I will be reading a paragraph from each. The first one, the name is Sold by Patricia McCormick. This book is sexually explicit and has porn in it.
Man, we got along the back wall back there, we got a bunch of kids that are very young, and I understand what you're doing, and it's effective. But given the fact that we've got I counted about 20 kids that are 10.
Let me remind you that the children can get a hold of any of these books that are in the library. If the children will step out while I read this, that would be appropriate.
I'm gonna ask you not to read it. If you'll tell us what the books are, we will pull them and take a look at it. And we've taken action on the other books that have been written, but I don't want this read here today.
Well, you know, it's
I'm
the
sorry.
kind of thing that
I understand that what we are trying our best to get books out of the children's section. What you're talking about is books that are in the young adult section, and we've got specific policies that we're trying to enforce regarding that.
I'm fully aware. I've been submitting books. We've been sending them in. Some have been removed and some haven't. I do think
Excuse me, if you send a request in to have a book removed and you didn't get any kind of...
No, I'm aware. These are still on the shelf.
Okay, well, if you would let us know what those are, because you should get a response to every one of your...
Yes, sir. I'm aware of that.
Okay.
4 of mine were removed and 1 wasn't.
We want to know if you're not getting action on your request. We as a board want to know that. I'm not instructing you in anything. I'm requesting that we find out about if the procedure is not working. It sounds like it is for some, but not for others, and I'd like to know why it's not, if we can find that out.
These books that I was gonna read from are still on the shelf, but I respect the fact that you're asking me not to read them.
Thank you. But would you tell us what those are again? Soul was the first one.
One of the books is Two Boys Kissing by David, Levithan. And the other one, Soul by Patricia McCormick, McCormick.
Thank you.
I would ask that if you have any further comments, that should be allowed to make that you really didn't want those books read.
If you had any other comments, I understand that you wanted to read from those. Is there anything else you want to say other than
Challenge to that should not take away from our 3 minutes.
Yes, that's correct. You basically wanted to read from those, just to point out that those were in the library and that it violates the policy. What's in the books? Your point, right? You have nothing further?
Nothing further, she says.
Thank you.
Alan, can you go through just in case people aren't aware, can you like briefly go through the appeal process? So people know what to do if they find a book, because I think some people think they should come read it here, and that is fine, but there is a process to address these things.
Right.
Probably a better form.
For those of you who don't know, there's a form, and it's now on the internet. We put it on the internet, so it's easier to get to. But it's called a reconsideration of materials form, and on that form, if you find a book that you don't believe is in the correct place, then you fill out that form, you submit it online, or I guess you submit it at the library. You get the form online, but you submit it at the library. The book will be reviewed per your request, and a letter will come from the director after staff takes a look at the book and decides whether or not they intend to go with your request or not. And they'll explain, as was the case today, with the book in question today, there's an explanation that was sent to them as to what the decision was by the director. If you don't like the director's decision, as was the case today, you could appeal it as was done, and the appeal is done to the materials committee, who then makes a finding and brings it to the full board, which they did today, and the full board basically overrode the director's finding and moved the book to the BEC section. So that's the procedures, and I appreciate when people want to bring our attention to some of these, but it's just not appropriate today.
Chairman?
Yes, sir.
You asked the lady to not say something or to refrain from reading because children are present. I support that issue, but I don't want precedent here that, no matter which side of the issue you're on, don't think you can come here and shut down debate by bringing your children because you may or may not hear something that you don't like. I don't want this to be either side. I don't care which side you're on. Don't bring your children and think that we're just going to protect them and then shut down the debate. It's a public forum, public meeting, and we need to hear debate. We need to hear the comments, regardless of what parents decide to bring their children to our meetings.
We're talking about children.
Thank you. I've got, the next person is Salem, S-A-L-M, I believe is the spelling.
I misspelled it, I apologize, that's just my bad handwriting, it's Sam. Sorry.
What is your name?
Sam, it's my, I wrote an A that accidentally came apart.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sam
Hooker.
Hooker. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
So, my name is Sam Hooker, I'm a resident and taxpayer in Greenville County. When I was growing up, I would read about like 11 library books a week and go every week
But I pick out a lot more than that. My parents were pretty strict, and they had specific parenting values. And so what we do is I would go find books that I thought looked nice in the children's section of the library. I'd pick them out, we'd take them home. My mom would then use the absurd amount of resources that are available online to parents to effectively decide which books aligned with her parenting values and which did not. And then she would give me the books that she agreed with, and then the rest we'd just return later. And I believe that is, if you do not want your children reading about certain political ideologies or certain life experiences, that is how you should do it, because there are, again, absurd amount of resources online that very easily help direct you to what books have certain values and which ones don't. And again, we are also taxpayers and residents of this county. And if we want our children to read books with themes of being transgender in it, we have the right to let our children, again, run whimsically through the children's section, pick out books, and if we don't want them reading certain books, that is our job as parents to supervise our children. It is not the job of the library to censor books based on parenting values of a board. It is a library's job to serve the community and to just share and hold information. To just have the information there, and then parents can decide which information they want their kids to have access to. I don't think it's appropriate for a library to make decisions on what is harmful to a child based on personal, political, religious, or otherwise belief. Thank you.
Carl Miles.
Thank you. I don't know where to begin, honestly. So I'm going to just start by asking you on the board, how many of you have read the book Metamorphosis? Franz Kafka. Man wakes up, finds that he's transitioned, not from George to Melissa, but from a human being to a giant cockroach. I have a feeling that a book like this might wind up on your list one of these days. I don't have much time here, so I'm going to be quick. I'm just going to read some authors' names right now. Ken Kesey, Tennessee Williams, Truman Capote, Jack Kerouac, Lord Byron, Percy Bysshe Shelley, John Keats. You're probably going to find problems with all of them. Here are some books. Huckleberry Finn, To Kill a Mockingbird, Catcher in the Rye, the Bhagavad Gita, The Stranger, The Painted Bird, Lady Chatterley's Lover. And here is a quote. This was published yesterday. I begin the quote. Welcome to the end of democracy. We are here to overthrow it completely. We didn't get all the way there on January 6th, but we will endeavor to get rid of it and replace it with this right here. And here the speaker holds up a cross on his necklace and continues. After we burn that swamp to the ground, we'll establish the new American Republic on its ashes, and our first order of business will be righteous retribution for those who betrayed America. You're probably wondering who said these words. So I'll go to the beginning here. How religion and authoritarianism have come together in modern America was on display this past Thursday when right-wing activist Jack Posobiec opened this weekend's conference of the Conservative Political Action Conference outside Washington, D.C. This was published by Heather Cox Richardson in her Letters to America. Thank you.
Thank you. The last person I have time for is David Coop.
I was kind of hoping it wasn't going to be me. Anyway, I'm David Kopp. I'm a Greenville resident. I want to thank you for the 3 people who voted to take that harmful book out
effort to try to move these books into another section. But you know, when my kids were little, I used to come to this library, and we would come up with milk crates, and we would just go pick out whatever books you want, and they fill up milk crates full of books. And I paid lots of overdue library book fines. And but I didn't have to worry about the books being, oh, is it going to be something like George and puberty blockers or anything like this? They were just good, wholesome books. Okay, I didn't have to worry about this. But now I think we certainly do. You know, I'm 65 years old. And when I grew up, I didn't know any LGBTQ people. I know they existed, but me, my friends, nobody really knew much about it. But when my kids started high school, there are quite a few members of their class who identified as LGBTQ. So what did happen? Now, according to the statistics, they say like 25–30% of Gen Z are identifying as LGBTQ. Something is happening, and I don't think it's good. And I think I applaud your efforts to try to keep our books wholesome, that are accessible to the children, and try to keep up the good work. Thank you.
Okay. Got a motion to adjourn? All in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
You're so brave.
No.
I know, we just have to. It's good to see you again. I guess we're not supposed to see each other every 4 or 5 years.
That lady right there.
She did. Yeah, I'm like, I'm glad.
How sensible are
Have some work between now and
Right, you're right. Thank you. You too. Oh, where did he go? Nice to meet you. Take care. That I was Love you, sweet thing.